All right, I want to welcome any of you that enjoy this live version. I'm going to do a 7-day weekday series just for our worship singers because this is something I do every fall. I work with worship churches and we do vocal boot camps and things like that. Of course, this year it's been a little weird and we can't do any of that. We're social distancing, so we're still worship training without being face-to-face. That'll come soon enough. But I wanted to go ahead and get started with this series called What Your Worship Leader Wishes You Knew. And I know because I surveyed them all very recently and I put them all their comments into a list. And a lot of them I've heard before, and some of them really surprised me who voted their one thing. Because a lot of them I know, and I've asked this question before, and it's changed actually through this time. We've had some time of reflection, so I'm going to go through them all, handling the number one most important thing according to my survey. We're going to start with that right away today. My name is Kim Snyder. I'm a professional singer, certified vocal coach, and a creator of the Voice Club Method. I do what very few coaches can do. Nobody does. And what the rest of them aren't going to tell you. And that is, I really want singers to be able to know how to master their own voices, not be dependent on someone else's opinion or, paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for coaching like I had to. I think singers should be able to know enough to be able to protect their voices, grow as singers, and, know how you did it. I think that should be an expectation. Hey, Michelle. Thanks for joining. Okay, good. Well, I know the comments are working great. So if you join us while we're live, you can comment anything. But before I get started, I just want to tell you, this series was originally recorded. I have never, in my 10 years of recording video, had so many obstacles to recording a series as I have in this one. And at the end of all that recording, my video was damaged. And so I thought, somebody wants me to go live. So this is the way we're going to do it. We'll get through it that way. Today is the most voted on thing. Now, this is a topic that comes up often when I talk to worship leaders, and I've been a worship leader myself, so I'm a worship singer. Hey, Ashcan. Oh, thank you. But this one surprised me. Of this group of worship singers that I usually survey, and I added some new ones, I always do, I asked them one thing. What is your number one thing that you wished when your singers come back after your church is allowed to start up? We're in Washington State, and I don't think we're ever getting started back up. They just opened all the pot shops and the casinos. No churches so far. Hey, Barbara Ann. Shout out to you later. Hang in there, Barbara Ann. So the number one thing that all of them said is usually something vocal. And there's spiritual things in there too. But today we're going to cover the number one element. I'm calling it of the 7 elements. And I got to tell you something too. At the end of this series, I'm going to do one live show called What Your Worship Singers Wish You Knew. So I have nothing planned for that. I'm just going to wait for you guys to tell me what you want your worship leader to know. What do you think that would make your whole worship team experience better and more fulfilling and everything you'd like it to be if they really understood that thing? So I want your comments, and if you watch this and it's not live, still give me those comments because that's where I'm going to pull that material from. Okay. The number one thing is what your worship leaders wanted you to know about what I call naked worship. Now, that is not some title I gave it to create a little buzz or anything like that, but it's something that I experienced in my last 3 years of isolation, and I'm going to tell you about that. If you want to know more about what I do, thevoiceclub.com. I also have a series of high-level vocal training that I send out if you join our list at thevoiceclub.com. Welcome to do that. That's for you. If you're new to the YouTube channel, please subscribe and hit the bell because I'm going to be doing these every day. And I've got a whole huge series planned after that. I'm going to give you vocal tips in this series that you won't find at a conference. I've taught at some conferences, and so that's how I know. I'm going to answer all of your singing questions as I can get to them at the end. And through the whole series, I'll answer them all. And I'm going to give you a couple tips that nobody really knows that are going to help you based on my experience as a professional singer outside of worship and inside of worship at a stadium level. So there's lots of things I've learned along the way. And, why shouldn't you know those things? You should. Okay. So like many of you, I've been on the worship team since I was 12. Tell me what age you were when you started your worship team. Tell me that in the comments. I, like you, have gone to a lot of workshops, a lot of conferences, and I went because I really wanted to get better, right? Like you did. Want to be better at our skill and be a part of a really effective worship team because when they're bad, they're bad. And when they're great, they're great. and we want to be a part of a great team. But I'm guessing like you, when I got back, I got super busy, and then it was like the information was good and I was all pumped up, but then I was like, how do I make that happen by Sunday? This was my question professionally too. How do I take all that thousands of dollars of vocal education I got and make it actionable by my gig on Friday? 20s. Oh, you're late starter, Barbara Ann. Just kidding. Just kidding. It's really hard to do that. We get a lot of information, but to put it into place is really hard. But this has been such a unique time in so many ways. This worldwide pandemic, as sad as so much of it has been the only opportunity we would ever have in our lifetimes, and probably generations to come will never have, to abruptly stop everything, to be unplugged from all of our responsibilities, all our obligations, and to really think about what those things in our life mean to us. And I know for me, part of that has been what worship means. I've heard from some of worship singers that I know that have really thought about that too. My question to you next is, do you miss your worship team? What do you miss about it? Do you not miss it, and why? Because that's very telling too, and that'll give me some information for what to tell your worship pastor you want to know. Thousands of singers, believe it or not, this happens all the time. Thousands of singers around the country, in tens of thousands around the world, will quit their worship team when they get a break, summer break. Or, we're going out of town, I'm just going to take a break. I'll just off for the next 6 weeks. Many of them never come back. We need worship singers, and singers need worship. So my goal in this is to help you, equip you with the tools that you need to be actionably changing the things that hold you back from really expressing your musical worship in a wonderful, wonderful way and being a part of a powerful team, which always starts with one person. So that'll be you, right? Okay. Have you felt isolated? This stupid question, right? We've all been isolated. Some of us are like, yes, finally downtime. And some of us are like, I miss people. I want you to know, if you felt isolated through this whole pandemic, I understand you, because for the last 3 years, until right before the pandemic, I was housebound medically, completely separated from being able to go to church at all. Could not sit up long enough, couldn't sit in any chairs. We actually searched churches by the comfort of their seats, and I still couldn't go. So as someone who's one of you, very, very, very involved, it's been really isolating. And I'm hoping, like you, that during this isolation time, you've had some time to reflect on what worship means to you personally and worship means to you publicly and musically, because really those are all separate things. I'd love for you to leave in the comments thoughts you've had during this pandemic about worship in general, your personal worship, because this first one is always in the list. Naked worship is always in the list of what worship pastors wish their singers would know more about, but it's never been at the top of the list because I'm a vocal coach. And when I ask, a lot of people assume vocal stuff. So I can tell that worship leaders are really thinking about this more deeply. When I went from spending 90% of my time, easily 90% of my time as a professional singer, leading worship, volunteering in worship, traveling to do paid worship, and just being busy, busy, busy all the time, to direct halt and being very ill, almost dying a few times, and being pretty much down for the last decade after some serious medical mishaps and losing my voice twice. It was crushing to me. It affected my identity as a person. They say your job does, but really singing, if you're a singer, it's part of your identity. It's not like a guitar you take off and put on a stand. It's part of you, isn't it? So when I couldn't sing anymore, because the first time they had completely destroyed my voice, second time they went in and sliced right through my right vocal cord and muscle and left me without a voice again. That's a whole nother story for another time. But that really made me question my worship. So when I got this question from worship leaders about what I call naked worship, boy, I connected with that. It really separates us when we're unplugged from the things that we physically do to express our faith. And in this case, singing in your worship team. And we're cut off from that. Then it's like, what is our expression of worship? This is really what it was for me. During that time with God, when I was thinking, okay, what does the structure of my walk with God look like without, okay, God, I'm going to pray about this because I got to go sing about that. It really got super deep in my isolation to a level that I call naked worship, because being naked is not comfortable. Being naked is not appropriate in most places. And I know in my experience with isolation, my walk with God became so deep that there was so much of it that would just be inappropriate for the worship stage. It just wouldn't be. It was my naked worship. And that's what I mean. I'm hoping that worship singers have had some moments of naked worship during this pandemic. You know, here's the thing. I was a believer. I felt like my worship was fine. Everything is fine before, but we have changed now. We've had an opportunity to really, really look at what we value and what we don't and why. And when I look back at my worship before I was ill, I really kind of see that as what I call praise vomit. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I looked at what I did before. I would go up on stage. My heart's in the right place, right? But it's like, okay, God, give me something now so I can rush it out on stage and spill it on people so they can be inspired or encouraged, right? It's like, give me, God, go give it. Give me, go. But now that I have this depth that I honestly would have never stopped my life to do, like any of you wouldn't have stopped the world to have a pandemic, to have this opportunity to grow in our faith. God knows my heart, but come on, did we all want to stop? I was still stopped. I was just getting going. I was visiting churches. No more. Oh, let's see. Yes, the secret place for worship. And that's it, Barbara Ann. The secret place for worship. That's what I mean by naked worship. It's just like the most intimate relationship you have with a person. There are parts of that relationship nobody needs to know the details of. That is the relationship that's precious to us. Whether it's your spouse or your kids, it's precious to us. We have memories. We have things that really don't apply to other people in that relationship, but we want to tell other people about that relationship. We want to express that. And we do, just not everything, because it's our secret worship, like you said, Barbara Ann. It's our naked worship. Okay, so as I reflected on my own worship and the fact that my worship survey, number one thing was depth of personal worship. And that I was like, that's where I'm at. And it sounds like that's where you guys have been too. That's where we should all be as believers, but especially singers who go up to worship lead. That's where we should be. And man, what an opportunity when we get back on those platforms, if we start worshiping after we've had a depth of worship that we've never experienced before. Because what I've experienced in my long-term isolation is that when I go back to a worship team, whenever that happens in the future, I don't want to praise vomit. I just want to give the appropriate amount of cream off the top of that depth of relationship in my worship, because the rest of it is so intimate, so personal that it wouldn't be appropriate. But man, when you think if you could only take the cream off the top, what kind of wonderfulness will that lead to us being able to do in our worship teams? Ashkan says she's very, you're not alone. We're all critical of ourselves. In your mind, you got to listen to the series, Ashkan, because I am addressing this, I think in the next or the 1 or 2 days. I've got something specifically on feeling awful about ourselves and then being distracted by that. And I've got some breakthroughs for you on that, I hope. I find that if I look at my old worship and worship leaders that I've worked with, worship teams, think of all the worship singers you've ever been a part of. You've sung with them as a duet, on a choir, it doesn't matter. Everybody you know that's been in worship really kind of solidified in my mind into 2 modes. We tend to approach worship with one of 2 modes. I've been in both of them. And the first one is volunteer mode. I got to tell you that volunteer mode, I think, is where I was a lot longer than I thought I was, even as a worship leader. Really convicted about that. Volunteer mode happens when somebody asks us to lead or to solo or to be on the team. We really need help and you're a singer. Or somebody puts something in the bulletin, we're auditioning singers. So there is a need that's presented and we go in and we fill that need. And we do what most normal pre-pandemic people do. We look at our schedule and we see what's available and what we like. And we choose what we do on that worship team by what we prioritize elsewhere in our life. That's the way we've kind of done everything. And I raised 4 kids. I now have 4 grandchildren. Yeah, I do it. Yes, I started young. at 12. No, just kidding. But having raising those 4 kids, and women, you can understand this, holding the baby and rocking them back and forth during, I see this all the time still, the nursery isn't there yet and you're still holding the baby and you got the toddler clinging to your leg. I have been there, and then you're trying to really, get into the mode of worship. But really, when I look at what I did on worship teams, even as like one of the 10%, that's always volunteering, I really did schedule it around, we got parent-teacher conferences, we've got this, we've got that. All of those things were on my calendar. Therefore, when I looked at worship, I said, oh yeah, I'd love to serve. Where does that fit? Also, I realized when I look back at volunteer worship, not that this doesn't happen all the time to human beings in general, I found more often I was more apt to be irritated by songs that I didn't like when we had to do them more times than I really thought we should be doing them. Everybody has an opinion, right? And it also wasn't nearly as fun if I didn't get a solo. Now, I'm just saying I got a lot of solos, not all the time, which the more I've grown as a believer, I love more. I love encouraging the other singers, but it's fun to sing. Who didn't want to sing, right? And that would kind of get under me a little bit, like I could have been so good. I wanted to do that one. Why didn't they pick me? And like you said, Ashcan, the voice in your head about I'm not good enough, or is this note going to come out, or what if I don't sound right, or what if it's too loud, it's too quiet, or all the things that we fear about our voice gets in there. Once I got to the point vocally where the obstacles to being worried about failure vocally were mostly removed, then I started seeing this other stuff a lot that I didn't like in myself. I think it's kind of like keeping tabs on the cost-benefit analysis of worship. If I'm saying, does it benefit me to be in worship team? Am I getting enough chances to sing? Let's just say it. Singers want to sing. There's nothing wrong with thinking that, unless it's the first thing you think of in worship. And I've been there. But it wasn't until I'd been in worship a long, long time before I went to my first closed team worship retreat. And it wasn't until that retreat that I actually was introduced to the definition of worship. I'm probably the only late starter to the game here. Worship. Did you guys know that worship means to ascribe value to one thing above or to the exclusion of all others? The first time I heard that, I thought, just like, what? Okay, if I define worship as my priority value to the exclusion of all others, and I look at my life, that means I've worshiped in church, on the platform. I've worshiped my kids. I've worshiped my job. I've worshiped how much gas I have in the car. I've worshiped what meal I have to prepare for the family after that. To ascribe value, and we talk about this all the time, it's not just one day a week, it's all week long. We hear that and we go, yeah, we become numb to it. But the biblical definition, God says, is to put it in front of everything else. How about worshiping bills? Have we ever put all of our attention, our priority on meeting those bills to the exclusion of other things in our lives? Most of my life. Just saying. Even though God prepares for the birds and they are not at all worried about the pandemic, God keeps reminding me of that, we do it. It was really interesting to me. I did some scripture research for this episode, and man, God just like slaps you, just like punches you in the face with a real good verse in a good way. You know what I mean? And these were the two that he brought to me that were just personally. Genesis, when God talks about both Noah and Enoch, he talks about them walking in habitual fellowship with God. Habit. We know that word, habit. To make a habit of walking with him. I've been married for over 20 years. There are some times I have not made a habit of being close to my husband. Just saying. And there have been times, many, that I have not made a habit of walking with God. But that's what God sees as worship. And the other one was in Romans 6, when Jesus is talking to all of the apostles, and he was talking about being alive in God. And he said, to be alive in God is to be in unbroken fellowship with him. That means that I don't even have those times like with my husband, where we're just kind of like, doing our own thing, not really on the same page, to not allow those times to even happen. If you put those three things together, to worship is to ascribe value to one thing to the exclusion above all others. It's to be in habit forming fellowship with God. It's to be in unbroken fellowship with God. I think God's pretty clear on what worship means. And I got to be real with you. That has not been the first thing my worship has been a lot in the past. I'm hoping that this time is going to move us from that into worshiper mode. And this is kind of where God has brought me to in my time of isolation, to move from volunteer mode, although that may be very well-meaning. And we prepare, we do all the things we know to do, and we feel like we're doing everything right. To move beyond that to biblical worshiper mode is my private, my naked worship, my priority over all things. Is it unbroken? Is it a habit? Is it a habit is a choice? I mean, how many times have we tried to do the 30-day diet? I just started during the pandemic. I decided to go hardcore medical keto. One day, I've never not cheated on something. I've not cheated because it's a health issue. I need to. When we need something bad enough, we will prioritize it. And I'm hoping that us worship singers during this pandemic have needed God to such a degree that we've never needed him before. And that moves us into worshiper mode. This has been so true in my life and the singers I've worked with privately that are on worship teams and worship leaders all over the place. Our passion for, our effectiveness in, and our joy on our worship team really depends on whether we are worship volunteers or if we are worshipers. If the act of stepping on stage is just a secondary pop-on additional thing we do to our priority of growing that depth with God. And that made me think of people who just want to quit worship team. How many times have you quit a worship team? I don't want to count. I feel a little guilty. In this series, I'm going to show you guys how one person, meaning you, can change that entire dynamic. Hopefully with all the tools I'm going to give you in this week and next. Okay. And yes, worship should be our way of life, a heart enlightenment. You guys, you got it. We need to spread it. I really wanted to spend a little time, now that we've talked about depth of worship, which was the number one answer from the worship leaders, depth of personal worship, which to me is naked worship. Best thing my mother ever taught me was that I could talk to God like I could talk to anybody. That set the stage for so much of my spiritual growth. But to be able to talk to God, to tell him anything, to complain that you can't get out, or that I just wrote myself into 2 weeks of live things, knowing that I have to put makeup on and hair every day, and I don't have to do that otherwise. God goes, yeah, I know that matters to you. It really doesn't matter. God gets it, that we can just talk to him like that. As the Bible says, to enter the throne room. I got to share one thing with you. I've always loved lyrics. Since I was little, I would get out then the cassette lyrics and I would read lyrics and I would look at song structure. And the most powerful worship lyric I have ever read in my entire life came from a Margaret Becker song. The most powerful lyric of all. It says, I want to cling like a child to the fold of your robes. And that just hit me. Like, what a powerful image. You know, God talks about walking into the throne room and you're like, oh, it's God. It's awesome. He's a creator. He's all of those things. But when we enter, it's little Kennedy when he's under the president's desk, right? With his father. That's us with God. Yes, it is God. Yes, it's the throne room. But we get to come in as a child. We get to sit at his feet and cling to the folds of his robe, knowing that he's got us, knowing that he provides for us, he cares for us. That kind of security is super powerful. And that image has stayed with me forever. I hope that will inspire someone else. Someone else has got to put that in a song so that I don't, so that, Margaret can't say, you ripped off my, she wouldn't do that. She's very nice. Let's talk real quick. You guys need to know why singers quit your worship team. And one of the things that you said, Ashcan, I worked with singers before I really knew what I was doing, as a lot of teachers do. And then I've worked with a lot of singers since I've discovered things about the anatomy that no one else has had a chance to test, not even medical science. And in training singers, specifically for the church, I've seen an incredible pattern, both vocally and spiritually. And this is how it seems to go more often than not. The process of taking a singer who's excited to be in a worship team all the way through when they quit. First, we are singing. We notice things we don't like, right? We can all attest to that. We want to be better, though. We're there and we're like, man, I'd like to be better at that because I wanted to be on this team. But then we look around and we go, how am I going to do that? And then we look at our calendars and we go, when am I going to do that? And then we say, how am I going to afford to do that? And if I could do all of that, where do I even start? Where do I go? And a lot of times we can spend tens of thousands, no joke, tens of thousands of dollars studying every technique out there and still come up with new problems when you solve something old, still have new questions because one was answered, and still not have what you invested all that time and energy in doing, which is a bummer. But whether you go to that extent that I did or not, when we don't improve, it's because we don't improve that we continually feel on worship team untalented. Ever felt like that? People paid me to sing and I felt like that. So I know you feel like that. This is the beginning stage of unconfidentness, which is a word because I just said it, right? It starts with this thought. I don't like my voice. Now, you probably said that before you got on worship team. Most of us, I would say, everybody I've ever met professionally or casually that's ever been honest with me, I know for a fact some people are not being honest, have admitted that they thought that then and they think that, but in a different perspective now. I don't like this, I don't like that. So we want to be better. For whatever reason, we don't get better. So because we don't get better, we feel untalented and we say, I don't like my voice. And that is the root cause of being unconfident. Then when that attitude sets in, we start to leave the music to the good musicians. Oh, they're so many singers better than me. So-and-so does this solo better than me. They would never ask me anyway. And those thoughts begin to form the basis of everything we see musical worship through. And then because other people are doing everything and they're the ones who do it, and I'm not good enough to do it, I don't really need to show up on time. They don't even need me. It becomes this ladder we fall off 5 rungs at a time. And when that happens, this is the part we don't think about as the singer, because I've been here. We don't think about the fact that it will always, regardless of what kind of team, what kind of church you're with, it will always affect the effectiveness of your worship team. Because now they're down one person that was part of this whole. Even if you think it's a small hole, I've had so many singers saying, well, they got 16 singers on here. If I'm not there, it's no different. Yes, it is. As an audio producer, the way we set sound, the way we set levels, everything changes. As a singer, the parts, leading it, everything changes. As a band, the way we organize everything so we have a full enough sound. Everything changes when one person isn't there. It impacts the whole. And then when we see that other people are stepping up, which we didn't realize they had to because they had to, when we see them stepping up, we start to feel undervalued. Who's ever felt undervalued in a church? Now we feel undervalued. We already feel unconfident. And then we start to believe we cannot get better because we have seen this habit of things getting worse and worse, which really started at the very beginning with us not getting help. And it goes down 5 rungs at a time. And now all of a sudden, we're sure we can't sing any better. This is all the talent we have. That's all we can do. It's all we're ever going to be able to do. Maybe I'm not cut out for the worship team. I call this stage the ugly reflection point. Because now, you may have thought you didn't like your voice before, but when you get to this stage, every time you sing just about anything, you find something ugly in it. It's like there's a vocal mirror someone puts up to your face, and things you didn't even know you hated about your voice are showing up now. And you know what that does? Makes you feel worse. And then comes the break. Before it was a little break. Now it's been a hard crash of a break. You get an opportunity to step back from that ugly reflection, feeling unconfident, feeling untalented, feeling like nobody needs you. You don't have a place in that team. They don't need you anyway. They filled in when you backed off. Feeling all those things, you get a break, you're going to quit. That's what happens. And we have more singers quitting the worship team because of this process than anything else that happens in our churches. And I'm basing that on my 10 years of doing boot camps and talking with a lot of worship leaders and my own experience through my life as well. So I want to really encourage you with this because this is a lot of stuff that we're going to handle with some actionable tips throughout this series. I know definitively, undeniably, 100% based on what God has taught me about the anatomy through losing my voice twice and having everyone tell me it was impossible to get it back. And everything that I've learned physically about the science, the current science of the anatomy of our voice, and confirming it with the #1 vocal singer surgeon in the world. That was really fun. That's another story. I know for a fact that your voice can become an incredible asset to your team. I know. I'd put money on it, and I don't even have any. I would put money on the fact that you have no clue the extent to which your voice can grow, what your voice can do. I had no clue my voice could ever prepare. They told me it couldn't. All of them told me it could not happen. And I can sing plus an extra half octave now. So I know God put it in you. He created you to sing. If you look back in history, everybody sings. It's just part of who we are. You don't have to be talented enough to sing. You just have to sing. It was meant for you to be a joy, just like physical activity or breathing fresh air. Singing was a gift to you to enjoy, but we don't enjoy it because of all these issues. The problem isn't we need to add things to it or try new things or stand a different way or squeeze our butt from a different angle or pull a string all the way out. I've done those things too. But the problem is that the things that we add to the vocal machine are gumming up the works. But we need to be able to identify the obstacles and have a way to remove them so that we can have the joy that God built us with and purposed us to have in singing. This is not a matter of talent. This is a matter of a physical part of your body that the needs are not being addressed. Because the needs and training are not addressed, you can never have success. If you wanted to be in the Olympics and you had a particular love for a certain sport, if you didn't have the right training for that, you'd never get to the Olympics. And you'd say, I guess my body just wasn't built to do that. And of course we go, that's stupid. But yet our voice is just a part of our anatomy. And our training for the voice just is kind of, I don't know, try this. Man, let's try that. Maybe give it 6 months. And that's just not what we should accept in this day and age, I think. Okay, in light of that, let's just say right now, you believe that God created you with a voice that can do amazing things, that the only reason you haven't gotten there and you feel unconfident isn't because you lack anything. It's because you've just not been able to identify the things that are in the way and remove them. If those things are true, if there is an answer for the problems that you have with your voice that become obstacles on stage, and that becomes an obstacle to our ability to personally take our depth of walk with God to the platform, doesn't it? Because if I'm thinking about, oh no, I don't know if I'm going to reach that note, at the same time, God is reminding me of something that we had this moment in our depth of worship, and he wants to put that face on my face that I had when he revealed that thing to me privately. He's like, yes, let's remember this. And I'm like, oh yeah, just hang on a minute, God. I have to worry about this note. Okay, just wait. Now, well, that wasn't really good. And then we go, oh, now I got this note coming. Well, if I come down from that, okay, God, I'll be back in a minute. That's what happens. Our brain can only focus on one thing at a time. But if there was an answer for all of those things that draw our attention away from spilling over the depth of our private worship, then every negative thought you've ever had on a mic, on a stage, or a platform, or the floor with a mic, every negative thought is grounded in nothing but myth. You might say it's not a myth. I've felt awful before, but it doesn't keep you from anything permanent because it doesn't inhibit your potential for growth. I'd really love the things that you don't like about your voice right now. I'd like you to start thinking about them that way. I hate this about my voice, but this can get better. But I can learn to master that. But I can remove that problem. But what would it be like if on this song that I dread and on this part that they always give me, I didn't have to split 1/2 second with God to think about it? Because I'm telling you, I've worked with singers of all different skills and background and ages and vocal shape. And every single one of them gets to the point where they're like, oh, I can't believe it. I just got up there and sang. It was so much fun. It was like, you feel like a superhero. It's so crazy. Had I known this was possible before, I would have beaten down doors. Because depth of worship is the most important element of our worship. But every obstacle vocally and every obstacle outside of our vocal, whether it's our private walk with God is not deep because we're so busy or any of those things. They all put a stopper on the top of the cream that's risen to the top with our walk with God. So I totally agree with all the worship pastors I surveyed that our depth of private relationship, our habitual time relating to God as a priority over everything else is more important. But if we even have that and we don't remove other obstacles, you will still be singing like this because your mind is going, note, note, note. Oh no, high note. Oh no, bridge. Keep smiling, wave your hands. not this. Right? You cannot go both places at once. That's why I'm so excited, because can we fix all of that in 2 weeks? No, I'm not promising you that, but I can give you some serious things that are going to help you open those doors that you thought were walls and start moving towards that. And that's kind of my passion. It's kind of my mission. It's kind of my thing, and I get excited about it. Before I finish, I shout out to Barbara Ann Holmes. Thank you for showing up today, Barbara Ann. Barbara Ann gave me an idea, and I honestly don't know if it's Barbara or Barbara Ann, but you should tell me, Barbara. Ann? She gave me a great idea. She said, why don't you just we'll do just group classes for 4 weeks, an hour, and we'll just do them for $50, and as many people show up, and then we'll just do them as a group and really get dialed in to vocally all of our obstacles and get you some specific help. So if there is enough interest in that, I will do that at the end of this series. If there's not enough interest, I won't. It's just totally dependent on you. If you are interested in having my live sessions tend to run an hour and a half or two once a week for 4 weeks and get dialed into whatever you want to know vocally and get some private training for $50, let me know in the comments. Leave the comments. I'll be checking the comments throughout this entire series. If there is enough interest, I will do that for you. And if there's not, I won't. So please leave that in a comment if you want to. And thank you, Barbara Ann, for the idea. Now, this episode really wasn't something you have a lot of questions about. We have a lot of vocal training stuff coming up that you will have questions about. But I'm hoping that as you look at what God has revealed to you through this pandemic and what he has taught, I just can think about what he's taught me through the last 3 years about volunteer worship is the goal to me in the past. And no longer is that anything I want. I don't want praise vomit. I want cream at the top of the cup. And I want that to just spill like butter all over the people. That's a messy illustration, but it sounds delicious. But in order to do that, I've got to have that time. So I've got a challenge. Let me go back to, I wrote it down for you guys. Okay, here's the challenge that I gave myself, but I want you to take this challenge because it'll build into what we're doing in this series, okay? I learned that because we prioritize what we schedule, like I said before, that we should schedule our meetups with God. God is our primary relationship as a believer, and especially somebody who's going to lead worship, which everyone is on stage, right? So if we're going to put that as a priority, what does that mean to you? Put it in your schedule, whether you need to physically put it in your notes or wherever you hold it, in your iCal. Schedule some meetups with God during this time. You have extra bonus time. Schedule some extra bonus time with God while you have it. It will revolutionize the time that you choose habitually to spend with him once we get crazy busy again. So that's my challenge to you. I'm taking that challenge as well. I'm going to just admit it. I don't like reading. I get migraines. I hate it. So I have been not reading scripture verse by verse for a long time, and I've been really convicted about it. And that's what's coming out of my scheduling meetups with God. So I'm hoping you'll be willing to share some of the things that come out of your meetups with God during this time too. One thing I want you to do, this is really going to come to play in the next couple episodes. I want you to write down the top 3 things. You don't have to share this with anyone, or you can leave it in the comments. 3 things, the top things that that keep you from feeling really fulfilled in musical worship. If this should be easy. Most people can come up with a list, 6 pages long. I can. Right? Top 3 only. Think about everything that bugs you, everything you think distracts you from spilling over that personal depth of your walk with God into your corporate worship. Narrow them down to 3 things because we're going to try to get you major progress in all 3. And if I don't cover it specifically, I want it in the questions so that I can address it. Okay? We want to get as much done during this time as we possibly can. Top 3 things that keep you from feeling fulfilled, regardless of what they are, during your musical worship time in church, okay? And then the next episode, I'm going to help you with the number 1 vocal problem that I hear. I'm pretty sure I've heard it from every worship singer or leader I've ever talked to or worked with. I'm going to address that one next time. I'm going to share some stuff people that do professional stuff don't usually share. I'm going to tell you some things I learned because I'm really thick-headed and I've decided that God needs to teach me everything the hard way. And the only benefit to you is that you get to skip the hard path. I'm happy to do that for you. I want to ask you guys to do something. If this has been of value to you, would you like it? And would you invite somebody to attend our training here? There are worship singers that you know that have been maybe on the team in the past that aren't anymore. Invite them, because maybe God has used this time to grow them deep and they're considering coming back to the team, but they're not really sure how all of those doubts are going to play out. And I believe that during this series, we're going to be able to give them, as well as you, some really actionable tips and some serious hope for making your team incredible. Can you imagine what worship could be like after we've learned everything we've learned? If we can just move some of those obstacles away, because as soon as we come back to those platform, all those fears, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I can't do this enough. Oh, I wish I could. Trust me, Ashcan, when you start to gain confidence, and I know some of the rest of you can attest to this, as soon as you start gaining confidence, and I'll show you exactly why we lose confidence and the steps to gain it and what's in the way of confidence. I will show you step by step that process. But I will tell you, when you start gaining confidence, it's just as tempting to go, well, yeah, I hit the note, but I wanted to do that. One of you knows what I'm talking about. I just know, right? And so that can become just as much of an obstacle. Our goal in worship, and my goal as a vocal coach, is to help you to remove those vocal obstacles. Because we have to have the depth, we have to have that intimate relationship with God, or we have nothing to spill over. We don't want to just be taking, here's a little bit from God, there. Yeah. God says you can have a bit. God says you can have a bit. No, we want to say, oh, I know God, I know him so deeply. Just in closing, guys, I have a son-in-law who's an atheist. And yes, I say that with a smile. It's been so wonderful. I've built a relationship with him and watched him progress from believing in nothing to believing in some things, but not about God. And we're going through this process. And my grandchildren, by default, don't believe there is a God. And that's very hard for a Christian person. But my granddaughter asked me, what is God? And knowing that you're trying to be careful to not, usurp parents and we're all very close, and I don't want to offend anybody, but they know my belief in God. I said, here's the thing. I don't know your friend. I can't remember her name. She was talking about her friend all the time. I said, I don't know your friend. And so I could say, I don't know that your friend exists because I've never met her. I don't know anything about her. I don't know what she likes or doesn't like. So to me, I could say that person isn't even real. And a lot of people just haven't met God yet. And so they don't think he's real. But I have met God, and he's my friend, and we're really close, and I know a lot about him, and he knows a lot about me. And because of that, I know he's real. So that was something God used on me later to say, yeah, you know me. What does that mean? So I'm being challenged by that. I hope that will challenge you too in your walk. Would you please? Okay. Please join me tomorrow at 11 a.m. Ashcan, I love you. I hope you're here for all of them, because Ashcan says lack of confidence, stage fright, which we are going to so knock that one out. And brain flatulence. Yeah. Would you believe I have all of those 3 things covered? Even the flatulence. I planned for flatulence. So I love a live audience, and this is so much better than doing the pre-recorded. So please join me. Invite some singers who need some encouragement, and let's all be prepared to have the best, most authentic, crazy great depth of personal and corporate worship we can have. All right, guys, I love you for showing up. Thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. If you're catching this not live, please leave your comments as well. I will be checking that to see who's interested in the class or not. All right, bye, guys.